Hello, so my name is Leslie and this is an analyzation of mortality and universal suffering in the Shahnameh and in Dante's Inferno. So to begin with, these literary works serve to enlighten humanity on the aspects of suffering and mortality. As evidenced in the Shahnameh and Inferno, human suffering is a universal experience and is simply unavoidable. These hardships can be caused by a variety of things, but the most prominent cause in these works of literature is the own malicious nature and actions of humans, who in turn cause their own suffering. The tragedy within human existence is that suffering is everywhere, and that humans have to experience suffering just to face their own death one day. So to begin with, suffering is very prominent in the Shahnameh, especially in the tragic story of Rustem and Sohrab, two noble warriors who battle each other not knowing that they are in fact father and son. The mighty hero Rustem slays his own son and must live with the consequence of his actions, for his pride and thirst of victory lead to the death of his own son Sohrab. His suffering is so great that he does not even want to live with what he has done, and he goes into a state of grief. Another tragic story is that of Siyavush, who is the son of the king of Iran. When Rustem hears of the boy's birth, he is able to get out of his state of grief in order to go see him. Much later on, Rustem trains him to be a mighty warrior, and when he is older he returns to his father's kingdom, only to be accused of rape and falsehoods by his own stepmother, the queen. Even though he is innocent, these accusations tarnish his relationship with his father, who sides with his stepmother. This cold nature from his own father leads Siyavush to banish himself and seek shelter in the land of his father's arch-enemy. This unfortunately leads to him being beheaded. When Rustem hears of his death, he grieves for days until he decides to avenge his death by murdering the queen. Rustem takes Siyavush's death very hard because he practically raised him. He was the father to Siyavush that he should have been to Sohrab. So when Siyavush was murdered, he felt it was his own son getting killed, and since he could not avenge Sohrab's death, he decided that it was only right to avenge Siyavush's. These two tragedies exemplify the suffering in the Shahnameh and serve to show that anyone is fragile when it comes to mortality. Just because one is mighty and a noble warrior does not mean that death and suffering will not impart on them. In Dante's Inferno, suffering can be seen as a consequence of human action and of sin. From the story of Francesca and Paolo, this concept is evident. These adulterous lovers are murdered by Francesca's husband, who happens to be Paolo's brother. Upon reaching the afterlife, they are condemned to the second circle of hell for those who commit the sin of lust. However, Francesca denies the sin was of her own wrongdoing. In fact, she blames a book about an adulterous affair for enticing her to start an affair. Due to her sin, she is eternally suffering. Another story of suffering is that of Pierre de la Vigna, a former advisor to an emperor. During his life, he was always working and did not truly get to enjoy his life. When he was removed from the court and was imprisoned, he committed the grave sin of suicide because he wanted to end his suffering rather than accept it. De la Vigna played God, and for that he must eternally suffer in the seventh circle of hell, where he is bound as a bush that has no free will. These tragic stories serve as reminders that one must not spurn the will of God, and that their consequences will be taken into account once they face their mortality. From what we've seen from these stories, human suffering is prominent, and humans must learn to accept it because suffering provides valuable lessons that humans can use along their path in life. Just like how humans need to understand suffering, they also need to understand mortality, because death should not be feared or perceived as tragic. Humans have to grasp the fact that life exists alongside death, and that no one, despite status, power, or wealth, can avoid death. The most tragic part of mortality is actually not even death. It's that people do not live life to its full content and that they do not create value in their own lives. It is simply a waste of life. In conclusion, I had once thought the Shahnameh and Inferno were more of tragic, fear-portraying tales. However, now I see that they instead showcase suffering and mortality in a comforting way that acts as reassurance to humans that they are not alone in their suffering. The most important takeaway from this presentation is that suffering is natural, as is mortality. And that is what unites us all. Because humans should focus instead on living a quality life rather than think about how their days are numbered. Overall, if I had more time to work on this project, I would have delved more into the religious aspects of both literary works. But there's always going to be more information, and I'm content with the information that I have presented, and I hope that you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you for watching.